there. But with education, using the money that has been given us through CDF, we can be able to start changing that area. The last word to the people of Mpulungu is that I know we have a lot of challenges as a district, and please, we want you to give us time. This government is really working to address the problems that we have as a district. We are already working on the water system. Government is actually in front in terms of releasing funds to the contractor. So the water issues that we have as a district is going to be a thing of the past. Also, our CDF, things are moving slowly now, and people are even quite getting jittery about it, but we can assure you to say that we have your interest at heart.
You are still watching Parliament television, and the House is still on the 20 minutes health break, and it will resume to sit shortly. Still under consideration is question number 333, posed by Mufumbe, Member of Parliament, to the Minister of Health on whether government has any plans to construct mini hospitals in Kalambu, Kaminzeke and the Kashima East wards, and if so, when plans will be implemented.
And still to come on the order paper, questions for oral answer, understanding order 74. We still have 2 more questions, and we still have 2 committee reports which are coming up for consideration. And the first report will be moved by Soka Member of Parliament, Ms. Marjorie Nakaponda, urging the House to adopt the report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia 2018 to 2021 for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 27th June 2023.
We also have another report to be considered on the floor of the House, and this will be a motion which will be moved by Kaoma Central Member of Parliament. We cross back to the floor of the House. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for still being with us on Parliament television. Bells are ringing. Since we don't have a quorum in the House, and it is required that 1/3 of members of Parliament must be present in the House for any business to take place. And under consideration is question number 333, which has been posed by Mufumbe, Member of Parliament, Mr. Elliot Kamondo, to the Minister of Health, who wanted to find out whether the government has any plans to construct mini hospitals in the following wards in Mufumbe Parliamentary Constituency. That's Kalambu, Kamizekezeke, and Kanshima East, and in Beef, so when the plans will be implemented.
Yes, we still have 2 bills to be considered at the second reading stage, and of course we still have 1 more motion, or 2 motions actually, that will be considered on the floor of the House. And just now we go back to the floor of the House.
When business was suspended, the House was considering question 333 on the order paper, and the Honorable Minister of Health had just finished responding to a follow-up question by the Honorable Member for Kalabo Central. Any further debate? The Honorable Member for Kankoyo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, allow me to congratulate the Minister of Health for having brought back the health kits which are now in the clinics after 5 years of absence from our system. Mr. Speaker, I want to find out from the Minister of Health, when is she likely to come to the House and give us the services which can no longer be done by the ministry, which have been pushed to the CDF? Because it has been increasing, becoming a repeated answer. Whenever there's a question, we're told use CDF. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member of Parliament. At least you've recognized some work that the New Dawn government is doing in the area of logistics. Now, coming to the actual question, CDF, I thought, Mr. Speaker, the MPs are very happy with the CDF because now them and their communities can decide what they want to use the CDF for. Whether it be it in education, be it in health, be it in cultural, be it in commerce, empowerment programs, anything representing all these ministries that are in the government of today. So that if they make a decision that they want to build, they want to do agriculture, nobody will question them. The only difference now is that the Minister of Local Government, as minister responsible, has given some policy guidelines towards the CDF. And one of the important guidelines is that the CDF resources must go towards health, education, because those are and of course agriculture and empowerment, because those are the things that the communities keep asking for. We want water, we want education, we want good health. Those are the major demands of most of our communities almost throughout the country, including good roads. And for that reason, that's why the President, through the New Dawn government, decided that we give more resources to the constituencies and the districts so that they're able to do something. But that does not mean that the line ministries, for example, Ministry of Health, must now abrogate its responsibility, for example, to construct clinics. And we have not said that we have stopped constructing clinics because now CDF. All we have said is that there needs now to be harmonization between the priorities of the community and the priorities of the council, the priorities of, local government, the priorities of central government, so that there's no duplication and so that there's also no wastage of resources, whereby you put up a school without desks, without school houses for teachers, and in the long run, that school just becomes a white elephant. So the short answer is that Ministry of Health, like any other sector government department, has not abrogated its role or function of, providing more health facilities in the country, especially where the need is. No, we have not done that. And in my last answer, I in fact tried to take time to explain that in this year's budget, for example, we have provided for construction of infrastructure, meaning we can construct a health center, we can construct a clinic, we can construct a hospital. And we are doing that even as I speak. Next year, we shall continue to do that. So there just has to be some synergies so that there's no duplication. Thank you.
There's a point of order. Honorable Member for Mansa Central.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. I rise on a very serious point of order on the Honorable Member of Parliament for Lukulu East, Honorable Kalila. Mr. Speaker, my background to my point of order is that the definition of a hospital is a place where you treat patients with diseases or with injuries. A small hospital, Mr. Speaker, is known as a mini hospital. Mr. Speaker, by population, a place may not qualify to have a first-level hospital, but the distance to the next hospital may 65B may qualify a place to have a mini hospital. With a smaller scale operation, with lesser human capital, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Kalira is a renowned public health specialist, globally renowned, chairman, UPND Health Committee. Is he in order to sit, current or former, is he in order to sit quietly there, behind the Minister of Health, not guiding her on the importance of mini hospitals, not teaching her on what a mini hospital is and the importance of a mini hospital, and he's busy there, Mr. Speaker, allowing the minister to mislead the House, the nation, that mini hospitals are not important, and that she's abolishing them, when there are more than 100 mini hospitals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, mini hospitals accelerate progress towards universal health coverage, and a very important aspect of the global agenda, the UPND agenda for universal health coverage. Is that doctor in order, a member of the Zambia Medical Association, to sit like that, allowing the minister to confidently mislead the country and the House on serious health systems matters? Mr. Speaker, I need a very serious ruling. I need a very serious ruling on this matter. Thank you.
Order. Order. Honorable member. As much as you wanted me to make this ruling, you kept debating and convincing, I don't know, maybe it's yourself, that what you were saying was right, but you've debated your point enough, such that my hands are tied to make the ruling. Because you were supposed to cite what had been breached, but you kept convincing, I don't know, maybe it's yourself or the House. So I think I'm conflicted, Honorable Member, to make a ruling. Let's make progress. The Honorable Member for Nyimba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Minister, if you look at Mfumbwe, it's a vast constituency. I think one of the biggest constituencies in the country, just like Nyimba is. And the issue of mini hospitals, the issue of clinics, health posts, if you look at all these things, to a layman like me, it just confuses us. Because what I know is when people say we need a clinic, meaning we don't have a clinic here, I need to tell the CDF committee that people are requesting for a clinic. Now, yes, I've been interacting with the doctors. Now, if you look at the definition of a clinic, health post, maternity, and all these things, is your ministry, because I've checked different diagrams, different plans, okay? Some, they are old so-called mini hospitals now turn into another language, okay? Does your ministry, Department of Infrastructure, got the plans which they can distribute to the respective maybe district directors at your, so that in turn, because they sit, they are part of the CDF now, they sit. Now, so that they can tell us that this population at this area, we need such a facility, and it's costing this much. Looking at this population at this facility, at this area, because the population is huge, we need this facility, so that from there, we can know how to plan. So that if we tell you that, Madam Minister, so that when you tell you, Madam Minister, that we need, we are building 5 clinics at this, in Mfumbwe, we should know the support we need from you. Question to you, do you have the plans with your Department of Infrastructure, which you can relay to the districts or to the CDF committees, so that as you are being advised by your directors, we know what to build at a certain stage. Because for now, what we have, it's confusing. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honorable, for your follow-up question. Mr. Speaker, this is why I have been laboring every time trying to explain to my colleagues here exactly what we are doing. So my plea is that when I'm explaining, they must take a bit of time just to listen in, and if they have questions of clarifications, since we're in the same house, they can move to my desk and we can converse, or they can come to the office. The matter is very simple. And what is sad is that those that have created this confusion still come back here to create even more confusion, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate because, you see, when you look at the confusion that we have in this country today in a number of sectors, especially health, if people have that heart, they would not even be talking. And Mr. Speaker, the etiquette of government is that it's continuous, and those that you take over from, you will not hear them try to question in the manner we have been moving on this issue of this health sector, which doesn't build really. It's like we are in competition. When you lose or when you are moved from a seat, you must accept and support those that come there. That's how it is done. We have been there in certain positions, and those who have been long in this house will tell you that once I move, I go to the middle bench and there's another Minister of Health. You will never, if you check the hazard, you will never hear that I ask a question which is to try and demean the one who is there. You never do that. It's not done. Okay? It's not done. So my way of answering this question is that there is confusion. That's why we are trying to clean up. The President told you there's confusion. We are trying to bring things. We're trying to put things. And 2 years down the lane, even before 2 years, we are able to show the 2 years, the travels and everything. And our colleagues must help by supporting us. And when they think there's something wrong, they must come and talk to us. And we will listen when they have a point. But they must not try to use this floor of the house to try and, cause more confusion, because it doesn't help the country. So just to answer my brother specifically to the question, I wanted to say that the confusion you are talking about, which you are saying is confusion, I agree with you, it is confusion. There's confusion which was left. That's why we are cleaning up. But the people who caused the confusion are refusing us to correct the mess. You see? So, what it is this. We have reclassified. Why can't it be difficult? How can it be difficult for somebody to understand? We've reclassified. This is our own making now. Give us a chance. Don't take us back into your confusion. No. Allow us to proceed forward. We always move forward. Okay? And so, what I want to say is that, yes, you are right. And that's why we are trying to make it easier for you. That just know that there's a health post, there's a clinic. And for us, a mini hospital is called a health center. It's nothing but a health center. A hospital, my brother, Honorable MP, when you say something is a hospital, it must have what it takes to be called a hospital. It must have what it's called. When you call something, this is a secondary school, it must look like a secondary school. You can't have a 2-room or 3-room and say it's a secondary school. We don't do that. Okay? That can even be a nursery to this administration. So what you call mini hospital for us is not a hospital. It's just a simple health center. And we shall be constructing more of the same health centers. Some of them even better. and we still call them health centers. A hospital, you will see what a hospital looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. I think today this issue of mini hospital, clinic, I think has been brought to bed. I think at some point we waste a lot of time because I think any government has got its own mode or classification of certain facilities depending on what they want that facility to accompany it. So I think this issue today has been brought to bed. We should all make progress. We go to the second question. This question was constituency based. Next question, next question, honorable member for Mukushi North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Question number 334.
The acting minister of infrastructure, who is the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Mukushi North, Mr. Chibuye, asked the Minister of Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, A, whether the government has any plans to rehabilitate the Mansansa Old Mukushi Road, B, if so, when the project will commence, C, what the estimated time frame for the completion of the project is, and D, if there are no such plans, why? The response, Mr. Speaker: A, the government does have plans to rehabilitate the Masansa Old Mukushi Road. B, the project will commence once the Treasury has secured funds for the works. C, the estimated time frame for the completion of the project will be known once the detailed designs are done and the contractor is procured. And D, as indicated in A above, government has plans to rehabilitate the road in issue. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Any further debate? The honorable member from Mukushi North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Acting Minister, for those responses. I know for sure that the road that we are talking about is actually of high economical value, and the provincial minister seated behind you, Acting Minister, can attest to that fact that indeed the road that we are talking about is indeed of high economical value. Could there be immediate measures that the Ministry of Infrastructure can put in place to indeed try and the road in question motorable, especially in rain season? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Acting Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, we do recognize the importance of the road in issue. And in terms of what can be done in the interim, the Road Development Agency intends to undertake some graveling works on the road. The scopes of the work was determined following an assessment which was undertaken in May 2023 and will cost approximately 7.9 million kwacha. And implementation of the works is expected to start soon, with RDA doing the allocation of the necessary funds. So there is a solution in sight, at least for the interim. Although, of course, the intention was to upgrade the road to bituminous standard. Thank you very much.
Next question. This question was constituency based. Question 335.
Question 335, Mr. Speaker.
The Acting Minister of Education, the Honorable Minister of Youth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Chiewe of Lubansenshi Constituency wanted to ask, and is also asking, yes, the Minister of Education in A, whether the government has any plans to introduce Chinese language as a subject in all schools countrywide. In B, if so, when the language will be introduced. And in C, Honorable Chair of Lubansenshi, in C, if there are no such plans, why? Our answer, Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform the House that in question A, the government has no immediate plans to introduce the Chinese language as a subject in all schools countrywide, because it is prescribed as an optional subject. You may also wish to note that the Chinese language as an optional foreign language like French was introduced in the Zambian government schools in 2014 in line with the school curriculum of 2013. The Ministry of Education started offering the subject with 10 selected secondary schools, one in each province. B, due to the response in Part A, Mr. Speaker, Part B obviously falls out. And question C, why? There are no such plans, Mr. Speaker. The Chinese language is prescribed as an optional subject in the Zambia education curriculum framework, and it is taught in schools as such. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Honorable Member for Petauke Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving the good people of Petauke this opportunity to ask a follow-up question to the Acting Minister of Education, who happens to be a youth minister. Minister, in Zambia, we use official language from our superpowers countries like America. And the Chinese also is one of the upcoming superpowers. It's a superpower already. Yeah, the research which I've conducted. So, so when, as it is a superpower, are you thinking, oh, I know you have said that no, you don't want to do what, but as a country, Zambia, we need funding from all these superpowers. We need some support, in short, some support from all these superpowers. Why can't you think again about introducing this Chinese Niho from as it is also a superpower? Thank you.
It's difficult to even call up the minister because we don't use English. We don't use English in class because it's spoken by superpowers. We use English because we are a former British protectorate, and at the time, our forefathers, it was an official language. So we don't use it necessarily because America is a superpower, no. Next question, the Honorable Member for Kafue, Chiluvi. Sorry, Chiluvi.
Yes, because I'm the owner of the question. Read your standing order. I'm supposed to ask twice. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask, since the minister did indicate that it was introduced in the curriculum in 2014, and yet it's an option. And the question says clearly, it does not say compulsory. And after the question, I would like to qualify it that it's talking about Mandarin language. And the minister did indicate that it was introduced. We have not seen schools that are carrying out Chinese as an option so far. Maybe if you can list down the schools that are carrying out Chinese as an option, because the question did not say compulsory.
I think, Honorable Member, you know, under the circumstances, the Minister wouldn't be able to list down the schools. Even if you, Honorable Member, were to be Minister, you ask such a question, I don't think you'll be able to list down the schools. However, if you need to shed some more light on it, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to thank you for assisting me answer the over-researched Member of Parliament for Petauke, and also emphasize the fact that we do not use these languages because we are looking for money. That is a very retrogressive way of doing things and very confusing. Now, coming to, I think I indicated, Mr. Speaker, that right now we have 10 schools, one in each province, unless someone wants just to mention these schools. But I think I mentioned in our response that 10 secondary schools. In fact, I can even mention a secondary school like Sesheke. Yes. I can also mention another Chunga Primary School. It is being done. We also have Chiswa Primary School in Eastern Province. These are just some of the schools that are using these optional languages. But I think it is also important maybe to also say that it could be so difficult to make it compulsory. And I'm sure you know the reasons, because we need now to revise our curriculum. We need to construct more classrooms. We need also to procure more implements, buy more equipment, recruit more teachers. And I'm happy that we have one year that we could recruit. Maybe if we come to that, level, maybe we'll be able to rethink and see if the Honorable Member for Kaumbwe would be. But I think it's something that needs to be budgeted for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Kafue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for according this opportunity to the people of Kafue to ask this follow-up question on the Chinese language. Well, seriously, part of my question, I think, has been overtaken. I wanted to ask how many schools are offering, but the other part is whether we actually have the number of teachers that are offering Chinese, because this information is captured in the Educational Statistical Bulletin. I don't know if the Minister is in a position and has that data to share with us. I thank you.
I think the Minister may not be able to have, let's make progress. It's not possible that he may have the exact number on file, how many schools and how many Chinese teachers are there. Let's make progress. The honor of the question, the Honorable Member for Chipiri, Chirubi.
There is a very bad comment that has come from there. Yeah, I hope you heard it. I'll see you outside. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to find out, since the Minister did indicate that it's part of the curriculum as an option. We know, for instance, French is part of the curriculum as an option, and other subjects which are part of the curriculum, meaning that all the subjects that are adopted as part of the curriculum, there is material that has been developed to that effect, so that those pupils that may feel to undertake that a particular subject may have reference material. As government ventured into developing material for Chinese in those 10 schools that the Minister mentioned.
The Acting Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The answer is no, and also to emphasize the fact that even the Chinese teachers that we are using now are just Chinese volunteers facilitated by the MOU that we signed between the two countries. So we have not yet explored the issue of maybe what you are just suggesting. So as I said, Mr. Speaker, we haven't yet explored that issue.
The Honourable Member for Chipiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Minister, acting, as you are propagating to introduce the Chinese language, have you ever thought of looking at the subjects that our children are going through, where they are doing 9 subjects instead of 3 or 4 subjects, just like in China? There are only 4 subjects that they are taking in China. The honorable member here for Kaungwe can confirm only 3 or 4. Why should we also be taking 9? Could we have that deliberate policy where we can look at our curriculum and reduce the overloading of our children? Thank you.
So that question is a bit out of context, because we are talking about Chinese. Now you want the overall of the whole curriculum. Let's make progress. The Honourable Member for Ron.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Minister, I appreciate that today China is a growing nation, and most of our students, Zambian students that are sent to China, the first thing that they do is to learn Chinese language in the first year. My daughter was there for 5 years. She did 5 years Chinese throughout. Is your ministry, Honourable Minister, not considering, especially that we have a lot of Chinese investment in our country, and it is becoming a challenge in these institutions where there are parallel structures, and whenever the communique is passing through offices, there is Chinese language here and Zambian language here, which is making it very difficult for our Zambians to understand what is transpiring in these institutions. Aren't you thinking of starting the ball rolling now, Honourable Minister, to ensure that we start actually taking Chinese language in some of these institutions? I know you've answered, but seriously speaking, aren't you thinking of starting the ball rolling to ensure that Chinese gets part and part of our language? I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Maybe you can shed a bit of light, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maybe to clear this issue, I think I indicated that in secondary schools, we have both academic and vocational career pathways. So, which means that in some secondary schools, we do restrict offering of these vocational or academic, especially where it comes to optional. So, what we are saying is that under academic, we are offering 2 options, and also under vocational, we are also offering 2 options. So, as I said earlier, that in the meantime, we have about 10 secondary schools, 10 secondary schools that are offering this optional Chinese language. And also we are aware as government that indeed China is one of the biggest trade partner with Zambia that we understand. The more reason why we had to start some of these optional Chinese language in secondary schools. But as I said, we are trying first to see how this works, then maybe we'll be able to look at the option that you are giving us as a government. So, I also indicated that if we want to do that, then we need also now to change a lot of things by interrogating our curriculum, which will also give us a lot of work to do that I would confirm. So maybe the answer is just no for now, but I think it's something that we are really looking at.
The Honorable Member for Kaumbwe.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Jungzan Wenhua Jiaoliu Jiao I will translate. For enhanced cultural exchange between China and Zambia and trade cooperation. The efforts by the government to introduce the Chinese language in Zambia is welcome, and the efforts from the Chinese government, the House might be aware that University of Zambia, there is a Confucius School. Kunzi Shiren. Confucius School is offering Chinese language up to degree level. You study for 4 years. When you go to our Kenneth Kaunda International Airport, when you go to Levi Mwanawasa Hospital, most of the signs are written both in Chinese language and English. You find exit.
Honorable Member, ask your question.
You find exit is written Ancho and Chuko. Many places, there is all that China-Zambia cultural, traditional interaction. My question is, the efforts government is doing to introduce Chinese language, of course, as an optional language in secondary school, 10 schools, is much welcome in the right direction. Are we thinking of, is the Minister of Education thinking of making it as one of the criteria for university or college entrance requirement? I know, for example, if you go into University of Zambia School of Education, I mean, there's that minimum criteria to say of English as official language. Of course, you must get a credit and better. But would we consider also to say, to enter this course, you need a second foreign language, optional. Obviously, not just specifying that Chinese language, but just to specify other foreign languages for entrance into tertiary education. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of Acting Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to agree with him that in 2017, the Minister of Education, in collaboration with the Confucius Institute of the University of Zambia, developed a Chinese language syllabi for junior and secondary school education. And also, there is also an MOU that is signed, just an added information, that was signed between the Minister of Education and the government of the Republic of China through Embassy of China, obviously again in collaboration with the Confucius Institute of the University of Zambia. So that has been done, but I think where we will not commit ourselves is to the issue of someone getting to tertiary education. I think we have not yet reached there. This is just optional, which is being practiced at the secondary level. So until we get there, then you'll be able to update the nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We make progress. Notice of motion. The Honourable Member for Isoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House do adopt the report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia for the period 2018 to 2021, for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on 28 June 2023. I thank you.
Is the motion seconded?
Second, Mr. Speaker.
Seconded by the Honorable Member for Kanyama. The question is that this House do adopt the report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia in 2018 to 2021 for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 27th June 2023. The Honorable Member for Isoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Orders number 198G of the National Assembly Standing Orders 2021, a parliamentary committee is mandated to consider audit reports referred to it by the Speaker or a resolution of the House. In this regard, the committee was tasked to consider the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia for the period 2018 to 2021 for the second session of the 13th National Assembly that was referred to it by the House. Mr. Speaker, the object of the audit was to assess whether the Ministry of Health had put in place measures to efficiently and effectively provide mental health care services at all levels of health service provision. Mr. Speaker, the performance audit was motivated by the increase in the number of new mental health patients in Zambia. You may wish to know, Honorable Mr. Speaker, that in 2016, 19,733 new mental health patients were seen at mental health institutions across the country, out of which 8% were treated for depression. Secondly, the 60th President of the Republic of Zambia, in his speech on ethics and values of the 5th session of the 12th National Assembly on 12th February 2021, stated that the high rate of suicides, which is related to mental health among its citizens, was of concern. He further stated that suicide rates were reported to be 17.5 per 100,000 males and 6.2 among women, a scenario that he indicated needed to be stemmed. Mr. Speaker, it was against this backdrop that the Auditor General's Office found it prudent to conduct an audit so as to establish the extent of the provision of mental health services by the Ministry of Health in the country. Mr. Speaker, in order to interrogate the issues raised in the performance audit report, the committee sought both written and oral submissions from relevant stakeholders. The House may wish to note that some stakeholders who appeared before the committee expressed concern over the neglect of mental health care in Zambia. Mr. Speaker, the committee expresses concern on the absence of mental health services and units at most primary care level facilities. This is unacceptable, considering the increase in the prevalence of mental disorders in Zambia, which is approximately above 20%. The committee observes that this situation is serious and calls for urgent attention. The committee implores the government, as a matter of urgency, to ensure that all health facilities have mental health units and are given the same attention as those of other illnesses in terms of infrastructure. Further, the units should be operationalized, have basic equipment, be secured to avoid absconders, and should also have seclusion wards that would enable health personnel to contain the violent patients. Mr. Speaker, another issue of concern to the committee is that resource allocation to mental health. The committee observes with concern that the allocation to mental health of 2% of the non-communicable diseases allocation for the period 2018 to 2021 was insufficient to facilitate provision of adequate mental health care to the general population. The committee, therefore, recommends that funding to the mental health subsector should be increased, considering that it is paramount to personal well-being, productive family relationships, and for a successive contribution to society. Further, the committee was taken aback to learn that the Chainama Hills Hospital, which is the largest provider of mental health services in the country, receives less than 20% of essential psychotropic drugs per month from ZAMSA. This has resulted in the facility using 30% of its operational grant to procure drugs on a monthly basis to try and improve service delivery. Mr. Speaker, this situation, if left unchecked, will result into mental health patients advancing to critical stages. The committee, therefore, recommends that the government should urgently put measures in place to ensure that the procurement of antipsychotropic drugs is given the attention it deserves. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, allow me to express the committee's deep appreciation to all stakeholders who tendered both oral and written submissions before it. Lastly, the committee also appreciates your guidance and the service rendered by the Office of the Clerk of the National Assembly during its deliberations. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. I thank you.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak now or later?
Now, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Kanyama.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for according me this opportunity to second this important motion to adopt the report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to thank the mover of the motion, Mrs. Marjorie Nakaponda, MP, for the manner in which she has highlighted the pertinent issues raised in the committee's report. Mr. Speaker, just allow me to briefly look at the pertinent issues that have come from this report. You know, this illness, I think the government has not put much concern to it. I'll tell you one thing, that here where we are seated here where we are seated, there are mental issues here. There are mental issues here, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you may see someone seated quietly, thinking he's deep in thought of something that probably he wants to achieve. But someone is sick. You have heard, Mr. Speaker, from the report that a number of those that were tested, it was stress. People were suffering from stress. But prima facie would look at them as though they are okay. They are okay. Or they are sick. The challenge that I think we are facing is the fact that when we see someone putting on rags and then we say, no, this person is sick. Forgetting that even us who sit here, we have those challenges. So, to neglect...
Honorable Member, how do you put this House into your debate?
We are potential mental health, sufferers. So I think it's better at times we talk about ourselves before you go out there. Like I was saying, most guided. It was on a lighter note. Yes. So the emphasis I'm just trying to put across is the fact that can we, or can the government ensure that all facilities that we have in the country, all health facilities that we have in the country should have a provision where such disorders can be attended to. If you look at the report that has just been read, a number of provinces, districts do not have these facilities, to the point that if someone is affected, who need some transportation of some kind, maybe say for instance in Mbala or Mansa, someone has to come to Lusaka. To the point that if there are no finances, if there are no finances to feed that person to this end, you find that problem, it will be growing, till finally it will be will fail to curb it. So all what I'm trying to say is, for any institution, any government institution to operate, there must be a law, of which I believe in the Ministry of Health is a law. There must be policies, there must be guidelines, and structures. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the SDG 3, where we have adopted, which we have adopted rather, it clearly states that each member country should ensure that there is universal health coverage. And we need, among others, we need to mobilize funds, whatever way. Funds must be there to ensure that that is materializing. We need to have human resource, trained nurses that are going to look at such people. Now, what is surprising is looking at the report, we don't have human resource to look at those people that are suffering from mental disability. We don't have structures, more especially what is coming out. We're talking about Chatiza, talking about Mansa, we're talking about Senanga. So if those places are given such facilities, the challenges that those people from those areas that I've mentioned will be facing in terms of mental disability, then I think there will be a thing of the past. So if we are going to concentrate just right here in Lusaka, then we'll be discriminating those that are in rural areas, which is not a good thing. I would want to borrow what His Excellency the President has mentioned, where I said, whatever we are doing, we are not going to leave anyone behind. And if we are to achieve the topic that we have here, to materialize it, I think it's just right that the government mobilizes resources to put up those structures, and from those areas where they need rehabilitation, can we rehabilitate those areas? These people that are suffering from that mental disability are human beings who have got rights. And they just need to be attended to just as such. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, like I said, a number of us have got that disability. The point that if we don't put our heads together, look for resources, come up with these structures, then I think we'll be doing a disservice to ourselves and the government. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Any further debate? The Honourable Member for Kanchibia.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in supporting this very important report, I will restrict myself to principally 4 areas. I'll speak to the prevalence rates as captured by the report. I'll make reference to some pieces of legislation which, in our view, as the people of Kanchibia would need for this particular House to consider in terms of revision. Then I'll look at the state of mental health institutions as well as the need for community health systems and strengthening therefore. Mr. Speaker, the report tells us that 20%, approximately 20% of the prevalence rate sits at 20% in terms of the national population. 20% in a country estimated with a population of about 19 million people, you are talking about 3.8 million Zambian citizens at risk. 3.8 million Zambians at risk. Mr. Speaker, if we're to bring these statistics in this House, 20% of 156 is 32. I want to bring it down to where we are so that we realize that we are dealing with a matter that calls for urgent attention by all of us. Mr. Speaker, it is very important, therefore, that this House agrees that in terms of legislation, there's information that under the controlled substances list, there are certain drugs that ought to be used by mental patients. But it's very difficult to bring these drugs into the country because they are classified as controlled substances. This is a matter that calls for urgent attention by all of us because you are either affected or you become the victim. The levels of depression, we've looked at the number of suicide cases in this country and cutting across all ages. We cannot treat this particular matter with kid gloves. It is therefore important, Mr. Speaker, that these drugs, which are supposed to be used by mental health patients but classified under the controlled substances list, be lifted from there so that it becomes easier for patients, mental patients, to access treatment. From what we've gathered, or from what I have read, to bring in these drugs, you need express authority, express permission from government. And as we're dealing with statistics such as 3.8 million citizens in a population approximately, then there's every need for us to say that can we look at the controlled substances list. Mr. Speaker, the report speaks to the dilapidated state of mental health institutions and the stigma attached to these institutions. Now you look at an institution like Chainama. Just the mere mention of Chainama makes one to feel as though they're being taken to a prison. And yet this is a facility where 20% in this House can easily find themselves as candidates. 20% in the population can easily find themselves as candidates. The need for us to improve the infrastructure and improve mental health institutions is critical, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is important, therefore, that we treat these issues as matters of urgency. We are told of the common forms of disorders, as we have seen, and this again has been spoken to by this very important report. Mr. Speaker, it is very important that we go ahead to strengthen community health systems for mental health. And it is important this House, Mr. Speaker, understands that this particular matter is not just a matter for the Ministry of Health or any other department, social welfare, etc. It is everyone's responsibility. Even in terms of resource allocation, let's agree that we must allocate adequate resources to this particular sector. If we can, to this particular matter, if we cannot, Mr. Speaker, respond effectively to a challenge such as this one, then we'll be playing ping pong with a matter that affects all of us. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, as I conclude, allow me to state that acute depression is real. We have read of, and we keep reading in the news, reports of a child who murders his parents. These are mental health issues. We are reading of students in universities committing suicide. These are mental health issues. We are reading of professionals, highly accomplished, but under serious depression. The need for us to ensure that accessibility to treatment is enhanced, Mr. Speaker, is a matter that this House must take seriously. With those remarks, we wish to support this particular report and place on record that there's a need for all of us to treat this matter with a deserved sense of urgency, because none of us is immune from this particular situation. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Kabwata.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving the good people of Kabwata an opportunity to add their voice on the motion that is on the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, the provision of mental health services in Zambia was actually neglected for many years. Even the period that the audit report speaks to, between 2018 and 2021, actually, if you go beyond, you discover that there was actually very little that was happening. This report, Mr. Speaker, highlights a number of issues that affect the subject that we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, this report talked about the funding aspect. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, that only 2% is what is being allocated or was allocated between 2018 and 2021. Only 2%. But, Mr. Speaker, we have concentrated, we had concentrated much on funding other diseases, such as COVID, even cervical cancer. Yet, even the people that are dying in hospitals, those who have got cancer, some of them are not dying because they have got cancer. No. They are dying because they are either depressed or they are either having mental issues. Mr. Speaker, I think the issue of funding has to be looked at so that we can change the narrative. Mr. Speaker, I'll speak about infrastructure because most of the infrastructure that have been talked about, I'll start with Chainama. Mr. Speaker, Chainama was actually established way back in 1930s by the Catholic brothers. These are the people that established Chainama Health, that institution that deals with mental health. From that time, it has never seen any facelift until 1962, and that was actually in colonial times. Mr. Speaker, it's not only Chainama. When you look at the other infrastructures that are there in Chadiza, also I'll speak of Chadiza and Senanga and also Mansa. These are infrastructures that you, Mr. Speaker, you wouldn't even want to send any of your children there if they're facing mental issues. The reason is simple, Mr. Speaker. Some of these infrastructures that are there, you discover that they don't even have waterborne toilets. They don't even have electricity, and you expect to send somebody whom you want to reform to go and stay in those facilities. It will not work, Mr. Speaker. We need to look at the best infrastructure. That infrastructure that we have at Shainama, we need to start now modernizing the infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, the issue of security. I'll give you a scenario of what happened between 2017 and 2021. The issue of security, Mr. Speaker, is so worrying. We had a case where a female nurse was actually killed by some mental patients. So this issue of security needs to be enhanced so that the workers that work in those facilities are given enough security, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about capacity building amongst the people that are dealing with mental health. We have spent most of our time and most of our resources on training people on issues of COVID, issues of HIV, issues of cancer, but yet we have neglected this other sector of mental health. We have failed to build capacity in these doctors that we have around. Mr. Speaker, we had almost between 2017, if I'm not mistaken, between 2017 and 2021, we had almost about 15 doctors. Out of the 15 doctors, we only have 5 that are working in some of these provincial offices. Where have they gone, Mr. Speaker? It's because we're failing to provide the best services for our workers. They have gone to seek for greener pastures, and we have created a vacuum in some of these provincial health centers where these psychiatric doctors are supposed to man. Mr. Speaker, the issue of lack of transport. There's no way, Mr. Speaker, that you can talk about improving the mental health units when you are failing even to provide transportation. You go to Chainama, you'll find a vehicle that was bought way back in 1980s, and that's the same Land Cruiser that they are using. Mr. Speaker, let's be serious with what we are doing. If we want to improve the mental unit sector, I think there's need for government to start funding. Let's buy vehicles for this institution. Mr. Speaker, I'll talk about staffing levels. The staffing levels, I think, are worrying, Mr. Speaker. If you go in most of these first-level hospitals where they have created some units for mental patients, you discover that even the workers that are working there, they're having challenges. That's the reason why even these follow-up cases, they are failing, because there are no adequate spaces for people that are living with mental disabilities or mental issues. Mr. Speaker, I think there's need for government to come in and establish wards in these what you call first-level hospitals. Mr. Speaker, allow me to talk about the need also for the Minister of Health to establish what you call the National Council. The need to establish the National Council on Mental Health. If you read the Act, this Act was actually enacted in 2019. But from 2019, we have failed to establish this National Mental Health Council. If we had actually established this, we would have actually looked at the functions of the national mental health, such as to promote and protect the rights of mental patients. We are failing to do that. These people, they don't even have their rights. You go around, you discover that even in society where they live, they are demonized. Others are said to have been bewitched. And that's the reason why we are failing to improve in this sector. Mr. Speaker, allow me to talk about the drugs, lack of drugs. I think there's need also for the government to Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the supply of drugs is improved to this sector. Our colleagues in Australia, Mr. Speaker, they have even gone further to use drugs like what you call psychedelic drugs. These are drugs that they have now legalized in Australia.
And yet here in Zambia, we are failing to use psychedelic drugs. These are what you call mushrooms or what you call boa or fungus. You can make, you can treat somebody using that, those kind of drugs. And that's the reason why, Mr. Speaker, as the people of Kawata support this motion, we say that there is need also for a national mental health policy to be established or to be put in place, because as it is right now, we don't have a national mental policy. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Chimwemwe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I also thank the mover of the motion and the seconder as well. Mr. Speaker, mental health care has really been a neglected part of the health system, as evidenced by the budget allocation. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure if you've read through the report, you will see that the budget allocated during the year 2018 and 2021 was only 2%, which was just about 800,000 kwacha. Mr. Speaker, in 2023, the same budget was reduced to only 396,000 kwacha. That's almost about 50% of what was given. But Mr. Speaker, if you look at the concerns raised by your committee, it says there's lack of medication, infrastructure needs to be rehabilitated. We actually have very, very, very few infrastructure, meaning the budget needs to be meaningful. Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that the staff levels as well are very low, simply because the budget cannot contain them. Mr. Speaker, we've heard that we hardly have any psychologists in most of these general hospitals. Neither do we have them in rural areas, because the rural areas, Mr. Speaker, are highly hit. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the staff ratios, it says in 2017, we only had 2.94 per 100,000 population. But if you look at some developing countries, Mr. Speaker, the ratio is about 9 to 100,000. So you can see that the staff that we have is very, very, very low compared to what we're having. Mr. Speaker, we've heard of the infrastructure, which is very poor. We know that Ministry of Health, Mr. Speaker, pays more attention to malaria, HIV, and cholera. That's where they take most of their funds, and neglecting this very important part of health. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the barriers to mental health, we're looking at lack of awareness. Mr. Speaker, awareness is something that will make the whole country understand what mental health is. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Chainama Hospital, most of us believe that Chainama Hospital was meant for, let me use this word because it's a common word that we use, though it's so offensive, that it's a hospital where we take mad people. Simply because Chainama is considered to be a hospital for mad people, Mr. Speaker, we forget that there are other conditions that somebody suffering from has to go to Chainama. Like we have clinical depression, we could have anxiety, we could have bipolar disorder, we could have panorum. Mr. Speaker, if you look at it, imagine this well-known politician, if he had one of these conditions, let's say clinical depression, then he went to Chainama. Then these paparazzis had to just see him, get a picture of him, publish it, let Facebook and these other small little things start judging this person. What sort of stigma will this person face? This is the reason, Mr. Speaker, that awareness needs to be priority. Mr. Speaker, if we look at lack of limited access, yes, we've got very few clinics around the country that one with a mental illness can actually go to. So the stigma attached to mental illness, Mr. Speaker, is what is stopping people from actually coming forward. And even family members, Mr. Speaker, find it very difficult to take their child to a mental institution, whether somebody is suffering from stress. They believe the neighbors will start thinking the person is mad. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we're emphasizing that awareness should be priority. Mr. Speaker, if you look at our rural health setup, Mr. Speaker, belief in supernatural causes of mental illness, that's what is obtaining in our rural areas. Mr. Speaker, you will agree with me that the traditional belief system attributes mental health to either ancestral spirits or it could be witchcraft. So as a result, these people will never go to a hospital. What do they do in the end? They will take their patients to these traditional healers. The traditional healers will do whatever they do, but they will never heal this person because these people will never be treated. So what happens is the situation gets worse. At the end of the day, you'll find a patient being leashed, Mr. Speaker, to a tree. Doesn't matter what sort of weather. This is what we have in our rural areas. So I agree with most of our MPs who are complaining that they lack medical facilities in rural areas. It's true, we need those medical facilities in rural areas because we do not want to be losing that young youth or even an old person just because somebody is suffering from anxiety. It could be anything else, something that could be treated. Mr. Speaker, this is why we believe that the budget should be looked at and the staffing levels should be also looked at. The intervention to be put in place, Mr. Speaker, is education, especially educating our people in the rural areas, because with education, we'll be able to understand what mental health is. That is not just about mental illness, but it's got other conditions as well that people on a daily basis, Mr. Speaker, go through, and obviously they need that. Mr. Speaker, we also heard that we have very few psychiatrists in major hospitals. Mr. Speaker, I believe if the ministry could look at that, that would really help us. Because, Mr. Speaker, instead of everybody going to China, people would be going to UTH for some of these other conditions like stress. It could be anything else. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the drug allocation, it's very unfortunate that only 20% of the drugs required for these special people that really need to be served, because if they are not, Mr. Speaker, the condition becomes something that cannot be reversible. 20% of the monthly allocation of drugs. Mr. Speaker, this is very little. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the suicide cases, the move of the motion gave us statistics where in 2021 we had 17.5 per every 100 males, which is a lot. Mr. Speaker, if you look at these suicide cases, what is the reason of suicide cases? It's all because of mental health. We are not taking care of the mental health. And we've actually put it as a by-the-way kind of condition. Mr. Speaker, we have some gruesome murderers in our prisons. Mr. Speaker, most of these people need this kind of facility to actually help them. If we could have this, and awareness is there, Mr. Speaker, we could actually cut down some of this. Mr. Speaker, and we come to rehab centers. Mr. Speaker, we have very few rehab centers, and these are the rehab centers that we need. If we look at an area like Chimwemwe, we are actually battling it out with now the youth that are now found either smoking weed, either taking some of these narcotic drugs that are prohibited. Mr. Speaker, what we are lacking is where do we take them? We can counsel them, but at what level? We need somebody, Mr. Speaker, with the experience, somebody who's been to school, to actually counsel them and put them together and put them in a facility that will save their lives. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kafinsa.
Allow me once again, Mr. Speaker, to thank you most sincerely for the opportunity to make a few comments on this very, very important report. May I thank the chair of the committee. May I also thank the mover of the motion for allowing Parliament to discuss this matter, which matter for many years, Mr. Speaker, has not been able to receive the right national attention in as far as Parliament is concerned. We have discussed issues of infrastructure. We have discussed issues of how to build a hospital. We have discussed issues to do with bridges, roads, and employment. But, Mr. Speaker, we have not given this particular matter the right attention that it deserves. And for me, I feel that one of the reasons we've not been able to do that as a nation, Mr. Speaker, is obviously because of the perceptions that are there, how people view issues to do with mental health. I know my colleagues have handled some of the findings of the report. I'll try and pick out one issue which I feel the committee should have delved into in terms of much detail. And this particular issue, Mr. Speaker, is the issue to do with how people perceive those who have challenges to do with mental health. Mental health basically deals with issues to do with someone's psychological well-being, someone's emotional well-being. These are things that for many years we've not understood as a people. I think for many years we've been made to believe, as Honorable MP for Chimwemwe put it, that those who are facing issues of mental health actually have a very big problem which can't be attended to. So, Mr. Speaker, what am I trying to put across? And I'm happy that the Minister of Health is with us today. The first issue that I feel needs to be handled, that will even allow not only this current government, but of course future generations of those that will be in leadership to look at this matter differently, is first of all to go into society. If today we were to go to Mulenga compound as an example, how many people are aware that actually mental health is an issue that could be handled by appropriate health workers? If today we decided, let's take a drive to Ngabwe district, where one of our honorable members of parliament is coming from, they probably have never heard of even the word mental health. Because for many years, we've been made to believe that mental health is this big challenge that has nothing to do with possible cures being identified. So for me, the starting point, Mr. Speaker, as we discuss how much money we should give the Ministry of Health to deal with mental health, the starting point is where we are seated today and the public that is viewing this conversation. How many people are actually aware that mental health exists? The challenges of mental health actually exist. So the starting point, and I want to appeal to the Minister of Health, are we able to design a program? Are we able to design interventions, Honorable Minister of Health, that would allow us to go into the communities, start from scratch, go to the primary schools, discuss with Ministry of Health, discuss with Ministry of Education, where we simplify this simple issue. We try and make people understand that, dear colleagues, if we are discussing mental health, we are discussing a possibility that can be cured. Because, Honorable Minister and Mr. Speaker, if we don't simplify this challenge, these old traditional perceptions will continue. For many years to come, people will still think mental health is not a priority. And I want to agree with the Member of Parliament for Kabwata. He listed a catalogue of things that were picked in the report. But one thing that has to be dealt with as we draw near allocating more money, as we tell ourselves, let us employ more people that would deal with issues of psychology, have we made people aware? The 20% that Honorable MP for Kanchivia was referring to, how many others are actually have never bothered to report their cases to the hospitals? How many are willing today to start off from a house and decide that let me go to a hospital in Mufulira? How many are willing to go to Ronald Ross Hospital today to go and say, I've got a mental health problem? Very few people, Mr. Speaker, will have the courage to acknowledge that they have a problem that needs to be cured. Most of us here grew up thinking that mental health does not exist. I used to think that actually if someone is stressed, it simply means that they have a problem that they can't deal with. But stress is something that is real. And for so many years, Mr. Speaker, and this will continue to be the case if we don't design a program that will take us into Shuangandu. We call a community meeting not to discuss issues to do with a bridge, not to discuss issues to do with a road, trying to focus on the issue of mental health, where we raise awareness, we involve teachers, we speak to the problem. Honorable Minister, if we design that intervention, the next stage is now what has been picked in the report. Resources, other activities, those will fall into place. Mr. Speaker, my submission today is only one, and that submission is that can we try and make people understand what mental health is? If we don't do it, we rush to do other interventions. We assume that the solution is to employ 30, 50, 100 psychologists. Honorable Minister, who are they going to attend to? Who are they going to attend to? They must attend to people that are willing to come forward and say, I have come to Kitwe Central Hospital because I have a mental health challenge and I need help. Mr. Speaker, if people don't acknowledge that they need help, we are not going to make the required progress. So, Honorable Minister, the people of Kamfinsa are submitting that we need to design a program that makes people understand what mental health is, and then the other interventions that the report of the chair and his committee have been able to pick are going to provide the required solutions. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on this matter.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for Mwandi will be the last one, and the Minister will respond. The move of the motion will wind up. We have to make progress.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing the people of Mwandi through me to contribute to this report that is currently being discussed on the floor of the House. In supporting this report, Mr. Speaker, let me begin by saying I support the report fully, but there's also something that I wanted to bring to the attention of the House. And this is in regards to why you find that a lot of mental health issues are not reported to the hospital. This is the stigma that is associated with it. There is a lot of stigma that is associated to mental health issues. I think this I can only equate to in the early 90s. There was a lot of stigma that was associated with HIV/AIDS. And this stigma, when you look at what is happening to mental health issues, I think I can equate to that level. So as a country, we need to work so much to make sure that that stigma is taken away from society. Not only is this stigma associated with the patients, I must mention, it's also associated actually to even people, the health workers, that go out there to study to help the health patients. You realize someone, if one of our children here went and said, I want to be a psychiatrist, you find that most of people say, oh, Dr. Obofunt and things like that. So there's even a lot of stigma that is associated with people that actually work to study to help the people that have mental health issues. Number two, I also wanted to make mention in regard to this report that one of the things that I've also observed is the missing link in the reintegration of these people that have mental health issues. And one of the things that we think is that this mental health is not curable. When you go to the hospital, someone is sick and they're taken care of, society will still stigmatize them when they come back to society. They will keep on saying this person had mental health issues, despite them getting well. And not only are they stigmatized, the person who was sick is stigmatized, even their families are also stigmatized. You'll find that, for example, here men will find it very, very difficult to go and marry into a family where there's a mental health. They'll start saying, no, that you can't marry from that family because there are mental health issues there. So there is a lot of stigmatization, even associated with families that have such children. As a result, parents prefer to keep their children hidden because of the stigma that is associated to it. And then number three, I also wanted to make mention coming from Mwandi in regards to access to these health facilities. Like, for example, in my constituency, the nearest is Livingston, where you can refer such patients from Mwandi. That's a 7-hour drive for you to be able to access these facilities. So I want to support the report in saying these facilities should be brought really to as much as it is closer to the people, because this is a real challenge, and we cannot overemphasize the need to have these people, the medical services taken closer to the people. Number four, I also wanted to say, I've seen so much in regards to HIV and AIDS. There's a lot of tracking that is done. You'll find that when a patient has not taken their medicine for some time, there's a follow-up that is done by the medical staff to say that this person has not picked their medicine in such and such a time. When you look at mental health issues and the drugs that they are given, I think it is important that we should design a tracking tool so that there is continuous follow-up in regards to these people that are let into society after they've been dealt with, so that a follow-up is made in regards to these people. So we need to make sure that there is that link of tracking these people so that we can continuously monitor them. And then the other thing is the availability of skilled health workers. Like I mentioned earlier, there's also a lot of stigma associated with people that actually study to make sure that they can help in this sector. So we need to make sure that we work on sensitization, sensitizing our community to make sure that they understand that these health issues are very, very curable, and people are able to get cured when they go to the hospital, and they should be able to get reintegrated back into society. And people should stop that habit habit of referring back all the time. No, that person had issues, even after they get healed. So with that being said, and I also wanted to make sure, quickly also touch on the issue of handling of mental health, the mental health patients. Usually you find that the handling is done very, very bad. Usually they are chained, they are enchained, for them just to be moved from one facility to another. And you find also areas where they are kept, usually they're not in they're not kept very, very well. You know, there is a lot of dehumanization when it comes to dealing with these people. So we also need to help to make sure that our workers understand that we do not need to take that human rights aspect when we are dealing with such issues. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I would love to support the report on the floor of the House. I submit.
We don't have much time, so the Honorable Minister of Health to respond.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to comment on this very important report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services. Firstly, I want to thank the mover and the seconder of the motion. I also want to say that this motion is progressive, and I would like to begin by commending the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services for the comprehensive report on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provisions of mental health services in Zambia for the period 2018 to 2021. I would also like to assure your committee and the House, Mr. Speaker, that the progressive recommendations that have been made by your committee are, in fact, already in some instances being considered actively by government through the Ministry of Health. Government will prioritize the provision of mental health services by ensuring availability of resources to meet the needs of the mental health users and patients, and bring about improvements in the provision of mental health services in Zambia. Mr. Speaker, in commending your committee, I would also like to use this opportunity to thank those who have spoken on this motion. We had 5 very eloquent speakers who have ably articulated this very important motion, and I want to thank them. MP for Kabwata, MP for Kachibia, Chimwemwe, Kafinsa, and lastly Mwandi. How I wish this is the level of debate this Parliament would be all the time on all the motions. This is very good. Thank you very much, colleagues and members. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I've taken note of the recommendations pertaining to the need for government to ensure that psychiatrists are registered by HPCZ Council, that's the Health Professionals Council of Zambia. The House may wish to note that government through my ministry has already been following the tradition to have all health professionals registered and licensed by the regulatory bodies and psychiatrists inclusive. My ministry takes cognizance of the important role psychiatrists play in the multidisciplinary healthcare team, not only to mental health clients, but also to our general health care. In this regard, Ministry of Health wishes to have psychiatrists in most healthcare facilities and are encouraged to get registered and licensed by Health Professionals Council of Zambia, known as HPCZ. Mr. Speaker, the second issue which was raised in your committee's recommendation is on the need for government to leverage on the other players in the mental health sector by regulating. Mr. Speaker, government through the Ministry of Health highly recognizes the important role the private sector plays in the provision of health services as they supplement government's efforts. However, the Ministry of Health also notes with concern the exploitation of the affected citizens by being offered substandard, expensive, and provided usually by unqualified staff. My ministry is therefore committed to ensure that the citizenry is provided with quality, effective, and affordable mental health services and in approved health facilities and provided by qualified staff. Mr. Speaker, in this regard, I wish to encourage all private health facilities to get the necessary approvals from the relevant regulatory bodies and also to apply the established standards of practice in the provision of mental health services. Mr. Speaker, the third issue raised is on policy, standards, and guidelines, in which the committee was informed that treatment guidelines for mental disorders were launched on 10th of October 2022 during the commemoration of the World Mental Health Day. And the committee recommended that the guidelines be distributed to various districts. Mr. Speaker, my ministry is working on modalities to have these guidelines, which we launched last year, printed in masses to reach every level of health care in the country. In addition, government through the Ministry of Health is also working on reviewing and updating the mental health policy of 2005 to take into account new developments and best practices in the provision of mental health services. This process is expected to be completed this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the other observations and recommendations highlighted in the report was on the resource allocations to mental health services. I want to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that in fact, the New Dawn government attaches great importance to this subsector of health, and immediately we did what we could within our limitations. In fact, we increased the allocation to almost double what was being allocated by the previous administration. Just to underscore the importance of mental health services. And even as we almost or doubled that amount, we were cognizant of the fact that the money was still not sufficient, Mr. Speaker. It is therefore our intention that for next year, we could increase it further. And for Chainama Hospital, Mr. Speaker, government continues to prioritize it to effectively provide the tertiary services. To decongest it, government through the Ministry of Health embarked on the activation of the mental health units in most health facilities across the country to reduce the distance for referral to the hospital. Mr. Speaker, my ministry takes cognizance of the challenges of mental health in terms of infrastructure, and to address this challenge, government prioritized the completion of Ndola Psychiatric Unit that had stalled for so much time due to lack of funds to pay the contractor. And I'm happy and proud to inform you, Mr. Speaker, that we have since paid the contractor, and I wish to inform the House that we will be completing this by December this year, as the contractor now will move on site following the renegotiation of the contractual terms. Also to include the psychiatric units are the 20 first-level hospitals under construction, which will have at least 6-bed capacity for psychiatric patients. Further, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health will consider allocating resources in the 2024 budget to rehabilitate other psychiatric units in Mongu, Choma, and Kasama, and to build a new psychiatric facility in Solwezi, as well as give a facelift to Chainama Hills Hospital. Mr. Speaker, on the availability of mental health drugs, the House may wish to be reminded that ZAMSA is procuring mental health drugs, and the availability of mental health drugs is mixed in most of the health facilities. However, we acknowledge the challenges in the procurement processes of psychotropic drugs, which has kept the availability of the mental health drugs far below the level where it needs to be. The Ministry of Health is working to ensure that we procure mental health drugs through various government interventions. And once these drugs are in, we will stabilize the supply chain for mental health drugs. The committee may wish to note that rehabilitation services for users still remains a challenge, as the 3 non-rehabilitation centers are in a deplorable state. These are the Zanzu in Chadiza, Kawimbe in Mbala, and Litambaya in Senanga. Of the 3, only Zanzu is functional, with about 11 patients residing at the center. However, there are plans to rehabilitate the named rehabilitation centers, and local authorities have since been engaged to secure the title deeds of the premises and lobby for resources and support from government working with other cooperating partners. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Health provides the health services following the established referral system. Hence, every patient, regardless of the condition, should be expected to be provided with the necessary health services and referred accordingly. Mr. Speaker, mentorship, supervisory and technical support visits are being conducted to orient and stimulate all key players in the mental health service provision. Strengthening of the referral system has also been boosted by the recruitment of 334 mental health staff in the 2022
Honorable
recruitment
Minister,
process.
I think let's hurry up, we wind up.
Yes, I'm on the last. So I was saying that 334 mental health staff were recruited last year, all in an effort to add more workforce in this important subsector. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I take the recommendations made by the committee as timely, as we have noted mental health with few partners coming on board to support its programming. As you may be aware that mental health is a cross-cutting issue affecting everyone and every sector, and therefore there's need for collaboration, and so that is exactly what we are doing. And with the issue of decentralization, we are hopeful that we will be able to capture more. And the issue of lack of awareness is a big issue, and we've taken that on board, and we are working out various activities to make sure that we alert the people, and we hope members of parliament can also be part of that drive. Lastly, I commend once again the committee for the observations and recommendations made, and just assure you that my ministry will take them on board with the seriousness that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Isoka, wind-up debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in winding up debate, I would like to thank the seconder of the motion for ably seconding the motion. I would also like to thank the honorable members who debated in support of the motion, like Honorable Member for Kanchiwia, Honorable Member for Kabwata, Honorable Member for Chimwemwe, Honorable Member for Kamfisa, and Honorable Member for Mwandi. I would also like to
Order, you are disturbing the move of the motion.
Mr. Speaker, I would like the Minister of Health to take note of the recommendations and work on them for the common good of our people, of our nation. And lastly, I would like to thank our Honorable Minister for Health for recommending our committee. I thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I put the question. The question is that this House do adopt a report of the Committee on Health, Community Development and Social Services on the performance audit report of the Auditor General on the provision of mental health services in Zambia in 2018 to 2021 for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Tuesday, 27th June 2023. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, say no. The ayes have it. The question is resolved in the affirmative. Notice of motion. The Honourable Member for Kasama Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House do adopt the report of the Committee on National Security and Foreign Affairs on the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of the illegal immigrants in Zambia for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on 23rd June 2023.
Is the motion seconded?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Seconded by the Honourable Member for Senanga. The question is that this House do adopt the report of the Committee on National Security and Foreign Affairs on the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of the illegal immigrants in Zambia for the second session of the 13th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on Friday, 23rd June 2023. Any debate? The Honourable Member for Kasama Central.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to its terms of reference as set out under Standing Order number 197K, the committee considered the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of illegal immigrants in Zambia. Mr. Speaker, in seconding the audit report, the committee invited various stakeholders to present both oral and written submissions. I would like to believe that the honourable members have had an opportunity to read the report. I will therefore only highlight a few of the salient issues contained in the report. Mr. Speaker, regarding the development of the migration policy, the committee was informed that the National Migration Policy was launched on 2nd December 2022. However, the policy could not be operationalized as it awaits the realignment of the Principal Act, the Migration and Deportation Act number 18 of 2010, in order to support the operationalization of the policy. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the committee recommends that the government should, as a matter of urgency, consider amending the Migration and Deportation Act number 18 of 2010 so that it could be in tune with the policy and thereby support its implementation. Regarding security at the ports of entry and borderlines, the committee was informed that Zambia is recording an overwhelming number of prohibited immigrants from neighboring countries and beyond. The categories of migrants that were in the country included labor migrants, asylum seekers, undocumented or irregular migrants, and victims of human trafficking. The committee was also informed that much of Zambia's borderline was unmanned due to lack of human resource, thereby posing a security risk. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the committee recommends for the following. The government should employ more immigration officers to address the problem of illegal immigrants. The government should expedite the amendment of the Immigration and Deportation Act number 18 of 2010 so that it can provide for the introduction of border guards who will institute intensive patrols along border lines. The government should provide adequate financial and material resources, including adequate transport, to support the operations of the Department of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, on the revelations in the Auditor General's report regarding the prevalence of corruption and bribery in the immigration system, the committee was informed that some officials were receiving bribes in exchange for allowing undocumented individuals to enter or remain in the country. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the committee strongly recommends that the government should take a zero-tolerance approach to corruption and bribery in the immigration system. This can be done by stiffening penalties for officials who will be found to be engaging in such activities. Mr. Speaker, the committee was informed that Zambia lacks adequate infrastructure at some designated ports of entry. Meanwhile, some neighboring countries have the necessary infrastructure, which included office space and housing units for immigration officers. Mr. Speaker, the committee was also informed that the Department of Immigration and other law enforcement agencies operating at the border have been working in dilapidated buildings which were vacated by other government institutions. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, the committee urges the government to put in place the necessary infrastructure at designated border posts in order to enhance effectiveness in the operations of the Immigration Department. Lastly, the committee is grateful to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Clerk of the National Assembly for the guidance and support rendered to it during the consideration of the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of illegal migrants in Zambia. The committee is also indebted to all the witnesses who appeared before it for their cooperation in providing the necessary memoranda that inform the committee's recommendations in the report. With these few words, I urge all members to support the report of the committee. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak now or later?
Now, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Senanga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second that this House do adopt the report of the Committee on the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of illegal migrants in Zambia for the second session of the 13th National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, let me first thank the mover, the Honourable Member for Kasama Central, for ably moving this particular motion. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank members of this committee for having participated fully to ensure that we come up with all these recommendations. Mr. Speaker, I'll highlight only 4 recommendations. The first one, Mr. Speaker, is security at points of entry. Mr. Speaker, we have noted with concern that of late there have been a number of immigrants in the country, some of whom even ended up dying and being dumped. All this could be avoided if the screening at the point of entry is okay. Mr. Speaker, for the Department of Immigration to be able to be effective at points of entry, to ensure that only those that are supposed to be in the country can enter the country, they need financing. It's therefore important that the government considers improving the funding to the Department of Immigration. Further, it is important that the government also considers employing border guards at these particular points of entry so that they can be able to have surveillance over the borders. The second part, Mr. Speaker, is the processing of appeals for rejected permits. Mr. Speaker, the suggestion is that the Immigration and Deportation Act number 18 of 2010 should be amended in order to provide for delegated powers where the permanent secretary or the director for Immigration Department should be able to deal with appeals in the absence of the minister. This is so because there was noted a backlog of cases for appeals. Mr. Speaker, alternatively, there should be put in place a mechanism where an immigration tribunal should be instituted to which an applicant may appeal after the initial application is rejected. The current situation is that if somebody applies for a permit in Zambia and the Department of Immigration rejects that particular permit, that applicant will appeal again to the same Department of Immigration. The recommendation now, Mr. Speaker, is that if an application was initially rejected by the Department of Immigration, the appellant should be able to appeal to a tribunal which should be set, instead of him appealing to the same body which rejected the earlier application. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, is the availability of skill set in aiding the issuance of employment permits. The practice currently is that people that want to come and work or stay in Zambia apply without a set criteria of what skills are lacking in our country. The recommendation now, Mr. Speaker, is that the Department of Immigration should work hand in hand or in collaboration with the Ministry of Labor and Social Services, so that the Ministry of Labor can be able to provide the skills which are lacking in our country, so that those who apply are vetted against that, so that it's only those that possess the skills that we don't have in the country that can then be accommodated. Mr. Speaker, it is the view that the government implements the Zambia Information Management System. Mr. Speaker, the government should establish a centralized database to store information on illegal migrants, including their countries of origin, mode of entry, and length of stay. This will enhance the monitoring and tracking of cases. The government should expedite the issuance of digital national registration cards, passports, birth certificates, and the introduction of biometric system. Mr. Speaker, I second the motion.
Any further debate? The Honourable Member for Mansa Central.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the debate on this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, our country remains at risk of epidemics because of the borders that we share with various countries. As we speak about our policies on immigration, we need to broaden our conversation to talk about disease surveillance at the borders. We need to talk about increasing the infrastructure to improve and ease movement of our people, to contribute to our GDP, and further, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our country is kept free of risk of epidemics. Mr. Speaker, those will be my areas of debate. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I want to emphasize that the committee picked up a very important motion, a very important aspect to ensure that at the borders. We have improved infrastructure to ensure that there is ease of movement of our people and improved screening of immigrants who are coming into the country. My argument, Mr. Speaker, is this. Diseases are moved by human beings. Our border policy should be broadened to include border health policy. Mr. Speaker, people as they come into the country need to have routine or basic screening mechanisms. I call upon government, Mr. Speaker, to improve the border health policy as part of the broader immigration policy to ensure that we keep the country safe of diseases, from diseases that can cause epidemics in the country. Mr. Speaker, we are just recovering from COVID. Mr. Speaker, we are still neighboring countries that are still suffering or grappling with Ebola and with the cholera. And if we strengthen our border health policy, we will ensure that our population is safeguarded from epidemic-prone conditions that I've alluded to. Moving from that, Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize that shielding the country from these epidemics means shielding our economic reconstruction policy. Mr. Speaker, if our country is hit by epidemics, we will divert resources to managing those epidemics and will regress the gains that we've posted in economic growth. Mr. Speaker, our borders should also embrace the one border policy, one point policy, where it must be easy for members or for citizens of other countries to come in and for our citizens to go out of the country in order for us to ensure that there is ease of movement as part of improving the business environment. That way will contribute to the growth of our economies. Mr. Speaker, I will limit my comments to that, and I support the committee and urge that they broaden the conversation to include the border health policy to shield the country from epidemics such as Ebola, COVID, and cholera. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Honourable Member for Shiwangando.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to make a few comments in support of your committee report, whose motion has been ably moved by the Honourable MP for Kasama Central and seconded by the Honourable MP for Senanga. Mr. Speaker, migration is becoming a complex matter, and this migration has got there's a nexus between migration and some transnational crimes such as human trafficking. And indeed, the reasons for people migrating, as elaborated by the move of the motion, are categorized as already stated. And so your committee has made very interesting recommendations to be implemented by the government, one of which is the amendment of Immigration and Deportation Act number 18 of 2010, which the committee would want to see incorporate the migration policy which was launched in 2022. But beyond that, the amendment should also include the issue the seconder of the motion referred to, the aspect of border guards, who are in this case are to help enhance the patrolling of the borders, which are vast. Because, for example, Zambia shares the largest and the longest borderline with the Republic of DRC. So, while this is a welcome idea, and as pronounced by the President, it's not provided for in the law. Because as it stands now, the responsibility of manning the territorial boundaries of this nation is with the defense forces. And so, for immigration department to start recruiting those border guards, they must be provided for by the law. And so, we agree that the amendment to the Act should be done expeditiously. Mr. Speaker, this country is mostly used as a transit route for human trafficking cases. And I think the case that the second of the motion referred to, where we witnessed a large number of bodies of foreign nationals who were dumped on the grounds of this nation in the constituency of Chongwe, should be worrisome. That's not only the case, Mr. Speaker. There are cases where people can even risk being put in the container, an empty container, which is decanted off fuel lubricants, and they get to suffocate there. And these fellows who are involved in the human trafficking criminal activities do not really care. All they care about is the money they make out of that. So we shouldn't be a country which should be seen to be allowing such transnational criminal activities to occur on our soil. There is need, as recommended by the committee, to enhance sensitization in our border areas to ensure that people of Zambia start acting as patriotic citizens. Because most of these crimes are abetted by our own people. There are villages that are well known where these people come to hide before they are trafficked across Zambia, like Shangombo, which is near some border with another country. So, Mr. Speaker, indeed, we need to take drastic measures. We also appreciate the recommendations that obviously we need to establish centers where we need to keep these illegal migrants, because most of the time the only facilities we have are correctional facilities. So these victims of human trafficking cannot be kept anywhere other than these facilities which are available, which in some cases are considered to be inhuman. I just want to make it very clear to the honorable member, the second of the motion, who was talking about the appeals, permit appeals that are sent to the minister. It should be noted that the spirit was to ensure that the body that rejects these appeals should not be the body to hear the appeal cases. And the minister doesn't sit alone.
Order.
There is a mechanism.
Order. As the time is 19:10 hours, I interrupt the proceedings and debate stands adjourned. Day for resumption of debate.
Tomorrow, Mr. Speaker.
Debate to resume tomorrow. Her Honor the Vice President, adjournment.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn.
As the normal motion of notice for the debate has been received, as there no notice of an item for the debate on the motion of an adjournment of the House has been received, I put the question. The question is that the House now do adjourn. Any debate? Any objection? The question is agreed to. The House is now adjourned.
Today's business, and on the floor of the House was Shuangando Member of Parliament, Mr. Stephen Kampyongo, adding his voice to the motion that has been moved by Kasama Central Member of Parliament, Sibongile Mambwe, and this is the motion urging the House to adopt the report of the Committee on National Security, Foreign Affairs on the report of the Auditor General on the control and regulation of illegal migrants in Zambia